All right, and we are live. It's noon on a Friday, which means it's time for another book discussion. This week we are going to be talking about Daniel Pink's book, Drive, a little leadership classic. Now, every Friday at noon I do discuss another book that I've read in regards to leadership, just a way to kind of hit the high points. And if you haven't been on one of these before, I simply go through some of the points that I underlined in the book, some of those that I kind of noted in the book that could be applied for frontline leaders out there. Now, I say every Friday at noon, but I'll be honest with you, we have Thanksgiving holiday next week, and I doubt I will be getting to the next book, which is Team of Teams by Stanley McChrystal, next Friday, so it'll probably be the Friday after that. But with that being said, I'm going to dive right into Drive by Daniel Pink. Crystal, so good to see you here. So this book came out maybe around 10 years ago. And so the premise of the book is the importance of intrinsic motivation, not the sort of carrot and stick method, not the incentivizing and the punishment method. And it is something, this is a book I haven't read before, but obviously if you've listened to much of my stuff, you know how much I hit on some of these principles in the book. And I think that a lot of that has changed. It's been a big kind of sea change in regards to management and leadership, and the understanding that there is that intrinsic motivation in people, that they work harder when they have a purpose behind what they are doing. It's one of the big things if you're dealing with millennials that's important in motivating them. They want to be making a difference in the organization, in the world, whatever. And so there's been a lot more studies and a lot more attention focused on that intrinsic motivation as opposed to the more classical carrot and stick method. And so some of this stuff I wanted to say almost the first 2/3 of the book, I almost could have skipped over and gotten right to the meat of it. And I do like it when they have that meat section at the end of how to apply all of this stuff. But it is kind of reaffirming to go through that first section of the book. If you've read it before, you know there's a lot of good stories, a lot of good studies, and Mr. Pink really hits it hard as far as breaking down the impediments to that more typical incentivized motivation structure. And there were a few good takeaways from it that I received that I wasn't really prepared for and wasn't ready for. And I will go ahead and get to those here in a bit. So for those of you that are tuning into this late, this is going to be a quick one. All right, there's a few dozen things that I want to kind of comment on this one, but the larger points are that it's important that you're working on the intrinsic motivation of your team. That's where some of the best benefits are coming from. And like I say, I think that it's something that's discussed way more now than it was, say, a decade ago when this book came out. But it is something to really come back to, because that carrot and stick, that incentive and that punishment method is almost a default. It's almost the easy route for many of us to go, hey, nobody likes to, discipline people and start writing them up and stuff like that. But it's often mind-wise easier than trying to figure out a way to get through to them. And so this book kind of nails down some of those points with it. Getting into starting with some of the highlights that I have on here, and this is a good takeaway from a work-life balance perspective, and this is just kind of in the introduction and getting into the topic and the discussion. He states in here, work consists of whatever a body is obliged to do, and that play consists of whatever a body is not obliged to do. So this is calling into the bringing out to the forefront the difference between work and play. Work is an obligation. Play is something that we do voluntarily. And what he gets at here is that there is more flexibility with that than we often give ourselves credit for. He draws the story of Tom Sawyer, who has to paint a fence and actually cons his friends into thinking that it's fun to paint a fence and this is great, and ends up actually getting them to pay him so that they could paint the fence instead of him. So he changes the idea of work into something that's play. And we have a lot of flexibility in our own minds of enjoying what it is that we are doing for work. And I'll be honest, most of us do enjoy what we're doing for work. The problem is we create a little script in our heads where we are focused on the bad things. And I know that script is in place because I dealt with it when I was in the workforce as well. Oh, I don't want to deal with this person today. I've got that meeting that's going on. I've got this problem. We're constantly focused on the negative. And there is a place for that. You want to fix problems. You want to address problems so that they don't fester and grow and so that you can hopefully get past them. But you also want to set aside time for, why am I going to work? Who do I like working with? What are the things that are going well? What are the projects I'm excited to get to? Or the ones that at least, I don't mind doing, those sorts of things. So when we talk about work and play, work is an obligation. Play is something that's done voluntarily. In truth, almost all of you out there voluntarily go to work every day. You don't necessarily have to go to work. You could find some other way to subsist. You could always find a different job, but you choose to go to that one. The question is, why? Get clear on that reason why, and it'll make it easier for you to see that work is a little bit more like play, and you can blur those lines just a little bit. But I like that little takeaway from him right off the bat. Now, as he breaks down, I'll keep coming back to that carrot and stick. A carrot is an incentive to get somebody to do something, a carrot that you put in front of a horse to pull something, for instance, or the stick, the punishment to drive them like a jockey does in a race. All right, so the carrots and the sticks. The 7 deadly flaws he talks about, and he goes into some of these a little bit deeper, but the 7 deadly flaws that he gets into is that the carrots and sticks can extinguish intrinsic motivation. The interesting part about that is as soon as you start paying somebody for something, then it becomes an obligation for them to do it. They don't do it as voluntarily, or they don't do it out of the goodness of their heart, and that often kills their intrinsic motivation to do something when you start paying them for it. Interesting fact that I hadn't actually thought of. Carrots and sticks can actually diminish performance because you're waiting for something instead of taking action. You're waiting for that positive feedback, or you're waiting for that negative feedback if you do something. Whereas if you're intrinsically motivated, you're not waiting for anything. You're just moving forward. Third thing is they can crush creativity. This was probably one of the more interesting facts on this, is that when you give a punishment or an incentive in regards to something, what happens is that the person focuses. They consider it putting on blinders. And so you get focused on what you're doing so that you can get the incentive so you can avoid the punishment. Now, what those blinders do is they cut out your vision into other options. So when we talk about creative endeavors, and I believe we touch on it a little bit later, it's often best to work from an intrinsic motivation standpoint than something that is incentivized. There's a few things, actually, I know that we're going to come across in that. So very interesting in regards to that. And they saw this in studies where you had to solve a creative puzzle. And those people that were incentivized for it actually performed worse than those that weren't incentivized for the solving of the puzzle. Fourth thing is they crowd out good behavior. So you catch people cheating. You see this with sales incentives all the time. They push all of their sales into one quarter so they get the maximum bonus, and then they don't bonus at all in the next quarter. So they game the system. All right. 5, they can encourage cheating, shortcuts, and unethical behavior. They can become addictive. This is what I see oftentimes out there when I deal with questions in regards to motivation, is that you have to be careful in regards to incentives that you're giving out for more than 2 or 3 time periods, let's say. So if it's monthly incentive, if you start giving it out for 3, then it all of a sudden becomes part of the job. It loses, it actually loses a lot of its power. It becomes something that people feel entitled to. And so then you are basically stuck with that particular incentive. If you have really great bonus structure, if you take that bonus structure away, oftentimes you will lose people because they'll move on because that was something they felt entitled to at that point. And then 7, and we've all seen this, the carrots and sticks, it can foster short-term thinking. Now, so getting into some of that and dealing with some of those deadly facts, as Daniel Pink calls them, the first question you should ask when contemplating external motivators, when contemplating giving incentives or punishment for something is the task at hand routine? Rewards do not undermine people's intrinsic motivation for dull tasks. All right, this is the simple cookie cutter ABC sort of tasks that you have. You can look at external motivation for those sorts of things because it is little or no intrinsic motivation to be undermined, all right? When they are boring tasks, when they are routine tasks, when you're filing paperwork, all right? Go ahead, you can have some sort of external motivation for that because you're not losing anything, because nobody has any sort of intrinsic desire to file paperwork or do the most mundane tasks that are out there. That's what he's getting at with this. And so there's a key element here and distinction to be drawn between simple, boring, and routine tasks and important, creative tasks. All right, there's a spectrum there. All right, those creative and important tasks are actually best done with intrinsic motivation, self-motivation. Those boring tasks get accomplished best with some external motivation because there is no intrinsic desire to mundanely file paperwork or clean up the warehouse or whatever it happens to be. All right. Now, when you're giving some of these external motivators, one of the most important things in dealing with boring tasks, he comes up with 3 quick steps, and I really like these. I think I've kind of touched on these before. You want to offer a rationale for why the task is necessary. So you have the boring task. I'll keep coming back to it, of filing paperwork. Why is it necessary? Call out why it is necessary. I know that it is obvious when you're doing something like filing paperwork so that you can find it again easier if you have to look for something. All right, that's obvious. But even just calling it out highlights that important, and you will get more buy-in for that particular thing. Again, that's just a psychological thing where you're bringing, instead of that being pushed back in somebody's brain as to why it's important, they understand it's necessary, it's just not fun. All right, but when you bring the necessity of it forward, the reason for it, the why behind it, then that gives it a little bit more of a sense of importance. Acknowledge that the task is boring. All right, don't shine them on, don't try to sugarcoat it. Let them know, really, that the task, hey, I know it's not fun, but it's important because of this. All right, so that's how you tie those two together. And then allow people to complete the task their own way. This comes up later when we talk about autonomy in this book. So you may have a boring task, but the least you can do is let somebody do it the way that they want to do it. All right, this may mean that they're putting headphones in. Great, they can listen to music and get paid for it while they're doing this mundane task. It can be that they do it in reverse alphabetical order instead of alphabetical order. Give them some sort of autonomy. When they have some choices into how they work, it's easier for them to do it. They don't feel like some sort of robot. And that's really what you want to get past in some of these simpler and more mundane tasks on that spectrum. All right? So when people aren't producing, this gets into our natural tendency. When people aren't producing, when you're not getting the results that you're looking for, companies typically resort to rewards or punishment. What you haven't done when you just resort to those rewards and punishments, I consider that lazy thinking. All right? What you haven't done is the hard work of diagnosing what the problem is. All right, it's almost a knee-jerk reaction, and we have a knee-jerk reaction for those things that are easiest to do. And so what you want to do in these cases, when you feel that pull, like, hey, I'm not getting the results, you know what if I give an incentive? We're not hitting our numbers here in mid-November. What if I give an incentive? What if I double the bonus if we meet our numbers by the end of the month? All right, that's lazy thinking. The question is why aren't you on pace to hit your numbers? What has gone on? Is it something with the product, with the service, with the support, with the team? What are the issues? Do a little bit of diagnosis. Oftentimes, that diagnosis doesn't take place until you've tried 3 or 4 different incentives or punishments. And all of a sudden, you're 4 months down the road, whereas if you looked at the heart of the matter already, you would have had it solved. So just a nice, important point to bring up. So the 3 areas that we're going to talk about now. So moving out of that mundane, that routine, all right, that's how you deal with that. You give them some autonomy. You give them the reason why. It's okay to give external incentives for routine, boring stuff because people don't have an intrinsic desire to do those sorts of things. All right, so flipping to the other side of the spectrum and talking about creative tasks, important tasks, really basic functions of how people work and the important things. The type of behavior that intrinsic motivation is going to come out of what he calls 3 nutrients: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. All right, I'm going to hit those things again. If you want to motivate workers here in the 21st century, all right, this is great for millennials, but it's great for everybody. All right, so much of the stuff in regards to millennials is stuff that, gosh, Gen X and baby boomers wish they sort of had. So not necessarily saying anything bad about it. So if you want to be motivating people in this day and age, look to give them more autonomy, look to promote mastery, and look to give them a purpose behind it. And we'll talk about that now as we dive in. And Ann, good to see you here. So talking through autonomy, what you're really focused on, and so this is where I go back to the fact that this book is a decade old. And there's been a lot of discussion in regards to it. I know this book had a big say in that discussion was taking place. But when I bring up a term like ROWE, R-O-W-E, a results-only work environment, we talk about that now. We talk about the fact that we're not worried about how people do something. We're worried about what the results of what they do are. And that's the best barometer for somebody's performance is the results that they do, not necessarily how they do it. In those flexible environments that we're in right now, where people have more autonomy over their work, are based on that basic principle. LaShonda, good to see you here as well over on Twitter. Moving on, there we go. And again, we're in the autonomy section here. Most 21st century notions of management presume that in the end, people are pawns rather than players. This is a big paradigm shift, and I wish he would have said 20th century management, not 21st century management. But again, the change hadn't really picked up steam when Daniel Pink wrote this book. I like that visualization of management and leadership and executives thinking of their workforce as pawns in a game and not players in a game. If you just work on that particular paradigm shift in your leadership, what you're going to get is a whole lot more engagement from your team. Give the team a say in what is going on in their workforce or in their workday. Give them a say in how they do things. Focus on the results. You need the results. Hey, I need this done by the end of the day. How would you like to do it? Ask them, how would you like to do it? If they give you an answer that gets the results you're looking for, well then fine. I want to say, who cares how it gets done unless there is a very good reason for it. All right? So bring your people in to their own leadership. Make them players in the game of managing your department, not pawns in the game of managing your department. I love that, that little philosophy there. Motivation 3.0, and Daniel Pink throws in, new terminology and buzzwords and things like that. That's what you do in books. Motivation 3.0 begins with a different assumption. It presumes that people want to be accountable. I like this. This is an important point. People want to be accountable, and that making sure that they have control over their task, their time, their technique, and their team is the most effective pathway to that destination. If you want more accountability in your workforce, and we all do, if you want more accountability, you need to give them ownership. All right, when somebody takes ownership, and that's why it's so important when you say, hey, I need this done, how would you like to get it done? Well, now they've come up with the idea. Hey, you know what? Sales are trending down for November. How do you think we can turn it around? Whatever they come up with, they are going to be more apt to follow along with. They're more apt to have instant buy-in because it's their idea. All right? That's the power of giving autonomy. Hey, I'm not saying it doesn't take extra work on your part as a leader. All right? I'm not saying it doesn't take trust. I'm not saying that it's not going to backfire. But what I am telling you is that giving more autonomy to your team wherever you can is something that in the long term pays off bigger. And so you sacrifice in the short term, maybe, and oftentimes you don't even sacrifice in the short term. You actually get a win in the short term to get the long term benefit, one of the most important things. Yeah, I love this book, LaShonda. Next comment, takeaway, control, ooh, good stuff. Control leads to compliance. All right, when you take control of your department, when you manage all aspects of it, I'll go ahead and say micromanager. All right, what you get is you get compliance. Autonomy leads to engagement. All right, when you give people control, then what you get is you get questions back like, oh, okay, wait, I'm supposed to come up with the idea for this. Okay, what is the purpose of this again? Okay, why does it need to be done? All of a sudden, then you're getting questions. All right, that's the simple aspect of engagement. Richman Tavi over on Twitter, good to see you here as well. So control leads to compliance. Autonomy leads to engagement. Engagement is a huge benefit for you as a leader because that gives you access to more information. More information leads to better decisions. That's what you get out of engagement. When you engage the team, you get more access to more information, which helps you make better decisions. You get a whole bunch of other benefits too, but just a cute little kind of catchphrase there. Next comment here. Effort is one of the things that gives meaning to life. So we're talking about mastery now. So we've transitioned off of autonomy, and now he's talking about the second pillar of motivation. So once you've given autonomy, you need to support mastery. You need to support people being better. And effort is one of those things that gives meaning to life. It's one of the... Comfort is, I like the phrase, comfort is the enemy of growth. All right? If you want to grow, if you want to develop, then you have to get uncomfortable with it. People recognize effort as something that is valuable. Your best days at work, I'll flip this over onto you. Your best days at work weren't the days when you did nothing. They were the days when something happened and you stepped up and it had a positive result. Those are your best days. All right. So effort is not something to shy away from. It's not something to try to eliminate from the team. It is something to be acknowledged and rewarded, because that's what's going to give people ultimate satisfaction. That's what's going to bring out that intrinsic motivation in them, which is the purpose here. It's Dr. J, Julius Erving, a famous basketball player, for those that aren't in the States. Being a professional, he says, is doing the things you love to do on the days you don't feel like doing them. All right. And that's one of those things I keep coming across, actually, as I go through these books week in and week out. That's probably the third or fourth time that I've come across that it's important to do what you need to do on the days you don't feel like doing it. This comes up a lot with, say, going to the gym. All right. What's important is that you don't take any steps backwards. Steps backwards are more painful, 5-10 times more painful than one step forward. So even if you can just go to the gym and do the basic workout, that's better than not going to the gym at all. All right. And when you stack those wins on top of one another, you get further along in the road. I know that's a Warren Buffett quote as well, is that, the key is not to lose money. Getting back to basic principles. Don't lose money because it costs more and you have to get a better return to get back to where you need to be from a financial perspective. So I've worked from the gym into finance as well. Next takeaway that I had here is the single greatest motivator, and I use this study a lot in the workshops that I do. The single greatest motivator is making progress in one's work. The days that people make progress are the days they feel most motivated and engaged. So getting back to the fact that effort is something that people intrinsically recognize as a benefit, certainly over doing nothing. And what this was a study that was done amongst researchers. And I want to say they looked at like 13,000 diary entries. They had people journal at the end of every day. And what was most important from a motivating factor wasn't the huge leaps forward. The most important thing was daily progress towards the goal. If they made some progress, that was something that gave them a greater sense of satisfaction than even those days when they had the huge gains. All right, that steady effort. Intrinsically, we recognize that as something that's important. Realize that when you start talking about improving your team, all right, developing your team, is actually just making simple steps forward. Yes, we all want that leap forward, but oftentimes that leap forward only comes after you've stutter-stepped your way 10 times forward towards the edge of whatever you're going for. So just an important point to bring up. Now, we move from autonomy to working on mastery, that improvement, all right? That's something that gets people intrinsically motivated. Yes, LaShonda, and I'm working on getting up early, even on the weekends as well, actually. The third thing is purpose. All right, we talk a lot about this. This is one of those things that's a buzzword almost now. As a manager, my purpose, and I like this as a definition of leadership, As a manager, my purpose is to serve the greater good by bringing people and resources together to create value that no single individual can create alone. As a leader, you do not accomplish things based on your own effort. You accomplish things through your team. All right, you are taking I'm losing the term here. All right, but you're working on a multiplier effect. All right, you're working on what you do and pushing it out to the team to get outsized results. All right, Janine, always good to see you here. So I just like that as a definition. I'll say it again. As a manager, my purpose is to serve the greater good by bringing people and resources together, bringing things together to create value that no single individual can create alone. That's the purpose. Nicole, so good to see you here. And then Robert Reich, who was former U.S. Labor Secretary, I couldn't remember what his job was. I recognized the name, though. He calls it the pronoun test when he goes into organizations. I did like this as a takeaway. And this is a good test for your employees and your management and engagement of your team and your driving of the purpose. All right. Do the workers refer to the company as they, or do they describe it in the terms of we? So whatever your organization is, all right, let's say you're banking in Australia, do they consider the bank as a they, or do they consider it as an us? All right, that's a great, I like this, the pronoun test, as far as seeing whether the purpose has been driven down to the team and whether you have the right engagement as a leader. A great little takeaway for you there. A lot of it, when we get to purpose, is talking through, and I'm butchering kind of a study that he's talking about in regards to, I think it was college looking for donations, is what it was. And so one group of people was given an incentive for how much money they got donated. And they performed very poorly as opposed to the people that weren't incentivized but watched a video of people talking about the effect that the university had on their lives when they went through it. All right, so people in the second group who read about what their work accomplished raised more than twice as much money as those that were incentivized. So when they clearly understood why they were doing something, why it was important, and everything has a sense of importance. All right, I want to be perfectly clear on that. Every job in an organization is important, otherwise it wouldn't be there. And every organization serves a function for society, otherwise it wouldn't be in business. So if you supply linens to the hotel industry, you are supporting individuals conducting business or getting away on vacation so that they can bring more to, their work when they get back, and they can create good family time. That's what something that supplies a hotel could give, for instance. Here in Vegas, and we're in the hospitality and casino industry, we're providing a release for everybody, a break from their day in, day out, so that they can come back to their regular life refreshed, hopefully, or at least, we talk about giving them a great experience or something along that, some memories, some things in life. What is the purpose? Why is it important? Get in touch with that, and that actually can be greater than just monetary incentives as far as getting performance. I like that. When people understood why it was that they were doing something, they performed better than those that were incentivized to do it. Nearly everything that people do is commissioned. So perhaps most powerful step you can do to move towards motivation is to carve out a small island of non-commissioned time. So what we're talking about here is studies were done in regards to artwork. All right, and so they had artists who worked on commissioned pieces, those that were done for money, and then they had the artwork that they did in their free time, all on their own. And when they brought those to art experts and didn't tell anybody about, any of this and had them kind of rank the work that they did in their free time was always recognized as more superior work than their commissioned work pieces. This gets back to that fact that when you pay somebody to do something, it becomes work. It becomes an obligation. Even if they love what they're doing and have a huge passion for it, it becomes more work related and less play related. And play is often where you find more motivation and also where you find more creativity. So especially in something like artwork, you can see where that plays out. And so not saying, and I think actually we'll get to it here in just a second, so I won't actually lead right into that one. There we go. The better strategy, talking through it, is talking about paying people. All right. The better strategy is to get compensation right and then get it out of sight. Right? Cute little rhyme to it. So get the compensation right, get the money right, and then get it out of sight. All right. Don't talk about it anymore. Work on other things. Yes. Next thing that I want to bring is type X bosses. The old bosses relish control. Type 1 boss or type I bosses, or the new bosses, relinquish control. You want to be somebody who relinquishes control to bring out that intrinsic motivation. All right? Not somebody that holds on to that control. So get clear on that purpose. Get clear on what is necessary from a financial standpoint towards things, so it gets it off the table so people can stop worrying about that carrot and not stop worrying about that carrot and get on with being creative. Being gets that work aspect of things off the plate and more of the play aspect of things in there. And I think that is about it. So Daniel Pink's book, Drive, talking about intrinsic motivation. All right, and the power of intrinsic motivation. Some of the takeaways from this that I got were that money can often not just be a poor motivator. The studies that I've seen, you can see money being, second, third, seventh sometimes. I tell people, I hit in the middle. I'm like, money is always a motivator. All right, but it is rarely the prime motivator for everybody doing something. And so it's important to get that off the table and work towards those intrinsic things as much as possible. Sharon, good to see you here. So it's important to not just work with carrots and sticks. It's fine to have punishments. That creates an environment of accountability. Those that, might have a tendency to slack off, you need that in an environment. It's nice to have incentives so that people have some reason to move forward. But those aren't going to be the things that get the absolute best out of your team. Those are baselines. I really almost want to say you want to diminish those as much as possible and really focus on bringing out the play aspect of things, not the work. Work is an obligation. Play is something that you do voluntarily. And what they see in the study after study in this book is that when you monetarily motivate somebody or have some external motivation for things, you tend to lose creativity, and you often get them out of touch with what the real purpose is, which creates all kinds of downsides. If you want that people to perform better, focus less on the monetary aspects of things, less on the carrots and sticks, and start talking about purpose, why what they're doing is important. Develop them, show them how they're progressing on a regular basis, and give them some autonomy over their work. When you give them autonomy, when you give them a chance to work on mastery, and when you give them a purpose, you bring out that intrinsic motivation, and that's going to get you much better work down the line. So again, Daniel Pink, Drive. Worth thumbing through. A lot of it is talked about kind of regularly now in the press. It wasn't so much a decade ago when it came out, but a good book to kind of thumb through if you find yourself in Barnes & Noble. With that being said, the next book is Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal. I'm actually finishing that thing up today. I will not be available next Friday at noon. I'll be celebrating Thanksgiving up in Seattle with the folks, but I will be following up the Friday after noon Pacific Standard Time. We'll get these book things going again. So with that being said, appreciate everybody jumping on here, and I'll talk to you all later. Take care. Bye-bye.